Hi, everyone. My name is Becky Robinson. I'm so glad you're joining us today. This is a special installment of a daily webinar series that we've been doing, the Daily Connection, during this coronavirus crisis. But today we have an hour-long webinar with Rich Brandt of RDR Group, and we're so thrilled that you've joined us today. As you're coming in, I want to orient you briefly on the Zoom technology. We want to welcome you throughout today's event to participate in our polls and in some chat questions. And so we invite you to find the chat panel. And when you do so, we request that you use the drop-down menu to select all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your comments. I would love to hear from you in the chat. Where are you calling in from today? I typically will ask a question at this point about whether or not you're calling in with a group. That is not so socially correct today. I'm assuming everyone's calling in on their own. But if you happen to be calling in as a part of your professional development, because of an organization that you work for, we would love to hear the name of your organization and give you a shout out. I'm curious also, as you're coming in, have you participated in other sessions of the Daily Connection? And if so, we would love to see that in the chat as well. A gentle reminder to use the drop-down menu to select all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see you and interact today. So again, we are so glad that you're joining us. For those of you who haven't met Rich Brandt, Rich is one of the principals of RDR Group, and RDR Group does amazing training for organizations, and they are fully prepared to offer virtual sessions in this coronavirus crisis. They have been doing so for many years and are equipped to deliver most of their popular training topics in a virtual way. So please stay tuned until the end of the webinar, and we'll be able to tell you how to get in touch with RDR Group. So welcome from Jackson Marketing Motorsports Events, chiming in from Greenville. Wow, very cool. And it looks like many of you are calling it in as a part of an organization, and we do have an international audience today. It looks like some callers from Ireland, from Canada. We often have Ontario. We have Saskatchewan. I think I can say it. So we're thrilled to have you with us this afternoon. Rich, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really great, in spite of everything that's going on.
I'm so glad to hear that. For those of you who don't know, Rich is based in Florida, and we were talking about some of the differences between Michigan, where I live, and we have a stay-at-home order, and what it's like in Florida and what Rich is seeing. So we'd love to hear that from you. Now, before we go any further, I forgot that part of the Daily Connection that's different from our typical webinars is this daily prompt, what are you grateful for? As we all seek to stay positive in these challenging days. So we would love it if you would take a moment in the chat, select all panelists and attendees, and tell us what you're grateful for today. One of the things I am grateful for today is that it is sunny in Michigan. It's over 50 degrees, and when I get a break later, I will get to enjoy the beautiful outdoors. Rich, what are you grateful for today?
I was just thinking I'm grateful for my wife. She's always been a germaphobe, and now she's kind of having her day in the sun in terms of being able to, I think, help us individually and even her friends to recognize how important it is to kind of stay away from germs. But just being able to hang out together, that's been the good part of the social distancing, is getting closer to her.
Wonderful. Well, thanks to all of you who are sharing your grateful comments, and welcome to Adam, Rich's son, who happens to be on the line and is grateful that his son is home and hanging out with the family. I love being able to see and reflect on the things that you're grateful for. So we have a lot to cover today, and I'm excited for us to dive in. And I know, Rich, I think you have some slides you're going to share as we get started today. Yes? Do you need to share your slides?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I wanted to say that I noticed I've already had a couple times where this is, the communication is broken up a little bit.
I'll take care of that.
Okay. Well, and I know that the system's overloaded too, so that's been a little bit problematic. Let me get my slides here.
So for those of you who are not aware, today's topic is customer service excellence, and we are recording. We will make this recording available to you later. And so, Rich, I'm really excited to dive into this topic of what makes service exceptional. So customer service is something that everyone in business is concerned about, and many use customer satisfaction surveys to make sure they're doing a good job. But in my conversations with you, Rich, your approach suggests that concern about customer satisfaction is flawed. Can you tell us a bit more about your point of view related to that?
Well, it's flawed in the sense that customer satisfaction turns out to be a faulty measurement of success. And what I mean by that is a lot of organizations are obsessed with sending out surveys. When I fly, I get something emailed to me from the airlines, the hotels, the rental car agencies, even hospitals. When I've had friends that I visited, they're constantly doing patient satisfaction surveys. And studies indicate, and this was published in Harvard Business Review in the 90s, that if companies make the mistake of counting 4s and 5s or 3s, 4s, and 5 as a satisfied customer, they're making a tragic mistake, because it turns out that people who give you 4s are 6 times more likely to defect and take their business elsewhere than someone who gives you a 5. And so the only customers that you can really rely on are people who give you 5s. And the basic difference between a 4 and a 5 is a 4 is what you would call a rationally satisfied customer. Your place of business did what they expected. You're somewhat cost effective, friendly, timely. But a 5 is an emotionally satisfied customer. And this has to do with a relationship rather than a transaction, an experience rather than just a purchase. It's being able to emotionally connect with someone that works at a place of business. And when that happens, then people are attached to your place of business and they won't go anywhere else. They'll inconvenience themselves, they'll drive a further distance, they'll pay more money, and they keep coming back and they tell their friends. And so what I want to talk about is the importance of emotionally connecting with your customers if you want to have a successful business. And part of that is due to the fact that times have changed. The old school, in fact, it was a kind of a philosophy in business for about 300 years, was something called the rational agent model. And we probably don't know about that, but we've heard of making a better mousetrap. And there was a Swiss-Dutch mathematician by the name of Daniel Bernoulli who came up with the rational agent model. And he basically said, if you want to be successful in business, you need to either make a better product, the better mousetrap, or offer it for a better price. Because the way that consumers operated for hundreds of years was, it was a financial transaction. And they were concerned about, is this the best use of my money? So think of your parents or grandparents. If they're anything like mine, everything they owned was basic, frugal. They wanted to make it last for 30 years. And today's generation, probably the last 30 or 40 years, they want more than just a financial transaction. They're looking for an emotional experience. The question that's uppermost in their mind is, does it make me feel good? And actually someone won the Nobel Prize in Economics, Daniel Kahneman, for debunking Bernoulli's theory. He actually entitled his paper, I think, Bernoulli's Error, because today, 80% of purchases are driven by emotion and 20% by the rational side of our brain. In fact, I just saw something recently where someone at Harvard Business School suggested it might be as high as 95%. And so when you think about young people, they spend a lot of money, a lot more money than they need to be cool, to be trendy, to be hip, to have something personalized. And this is why people will spend 5 times as much money on a caramel macchiato grande something at Starbucks when they could get a decent cup of coffee at McDonald's for $1, or they'll spend $50 for a fine dining experience. You know, it's not just the food, it's the linen cloth, it's the crystal, it's the violin music. And particularly when people go on vacations, they spend enormous amounts of money in terms of where they stay because they want a resort, they want the spa, they want the swimming pool. And so times have changed. People are looking for more.
So people are letting their emotions play a bigger role in the customer experience than anything else. So do you have some specific examples you can share?
It's really a fascinating study. There's a part of the brain called the limbic system, and that's the emotional center of the brain. And when something gets in our limbic system, we form really strong attachments or loyalties. And some companies know this and use it to their advantage. So for instance, Bloomingdale's emits a light scent of Johnson's baby powder through their filtration system because women, one of their favorite smells is baby powder. And some other places, like a lot of the food stores, will have the baking done right up front, so you smell cookies and bread when you walk in. They're trying to get into that emotional center of your brain. When you buy a new car, I just found out when we developed this course years ago that there is no such thing as a new car smell. That comes out of an aerosol can. So they actually spray each car with that new car smell so that you're hooked emotionally and feel, oh, I just have to have this car. You could actually spray your used car with the same aerosol spray if you'd like. And one of my favorite examples of the power of emotions in terms of branding was the Pepsi Challenge, which you'd have to be old enough to remember this, but in the late 70s,
I'm
early
old
80s.
enough, Rich. I'm old enough.
Well, you look younger. So that in the early 80s particularly is when it peaked, and they televised these challenges where they would go to supermarkets and they would stop people as they came outside and give them a blindfold test, a sip of Pepsi, a sip of Coke. People did choose Pepsi more than Coke. So their brain said, oh yeah, I like this, tastes better. Then they would go in the store and buy Coke because they were emotionally attached to Coke. It didn't matter what the brain said rationally. It might have been the red logo, that fancy bottle that everybody remembers, the fact that grandma used to have Coke, and those memories are attached to the experience. Like people think that it tastes, it really doesn't. It's just that, it taps into that limbic system when you touch that glass bottle. And so I thought would be a good example to kind of share with our participants is to ask them, what are you a fan of? And you can maybe just kind of use the chat bar for this. Like, what are you attached to? What are you really loyal? Maybe it's a TV show, maybe it's a hobby, maybe it's a pet, maybe it's a band. And think of some things that you'll do that are kind of irrational because of that devotion you have, how it trumps the rational part of your brain. So maybe we can just kind of see what they're thinking on this.
Sure, we invite you to use the chat. Tell us what you're a fan of. I see Lord of the Rings, the Steelers, Kansas basketball. Okay, Nate. Hi, Nate. Pete's over Starbucks, Joanne says. The Toronto Raptors, single malt whiskey. Is it a brand of single malt whiskey, I wonder? Jack Daniels, food, football. This must be a restaurant I've not heard of, Beyond Burgers. And I see the New England Patriots.
So it's interesting how people can be really avid fans of certain things, and it has to be that team, that brand. But by the way, if you don't know this, the word fan is short for fanatic, which in the dictionary is described as a person with extreme and uncritical enthusiasm or zeal. The uncritical is the important piece. There really isn't a big difference between brands of peanut butter, but we will buy the same brand. Toilet paper, certain things that again, we just form an attachment to, and the emotions take over. And the reason I think this is important to understand and what we're talking about today is that you don't want to just have a satisfied customer. You want to create fans. And so I look at it like this, a certain percentage of your customers are emotionally dissatisfied. They're detractors. You want to avoid that like the plague, because when people are emotionally dissatisfied, they share it with a lot of people. Your regular customers, the 3s or 4s that are satisfied, like I said, we've learned that they're just as likely to go somewhere else as a dissatisfied customer. But the fives who are emotionally satisfied will promote you. They'll tell their friends, they'll keep coming back. And so what we want to talk about today is there are 4 ways that you can emotionally connect with customers. And if we really focus on that, we'll do a much better job in terms of being successful in business. And I'm just
Well,
going to go ahead.
wait, do we have a poll that we were going to do about how passionately people are attached to their item that they mentioned that they were fans of? Did you want me to run that one?
I don't, did I have that? I'm sorry.
I do, I have it. I launched it. Let's pop this in really fast. So
Oh, I see. I didn't know that you did that. Okay.
referencing what you said you're a fan of, what are you passionately attached to? An interest, hobby, and then, you know, once you've identified what you're passionately attached to, how
Oh,
loyal
yeah.
are you? So we
That's
want
a
to
good
get,
question. Yeah.
yeah, that was your question, Rich.
Oh, I don't remember putting it in there, so I apologize for missing it.
Yeah, no worries. Um, so how attached are you? How loyal are you to that? And
I'm
I just
thinking
have to
of the
say,
sports
I'm
fans.
Team Coke all the time. I don't get people who like Pepsi. Coke tastes way better.
My son Adam reminded me that it's so hard for him right now because they're not broadcasting any sports because they're not, playing professional sports right now. And for some of us, that's not a big deal, but for someone who's really addicted to that, it can be a real challenging time. It's like withdrawal.
Yeah, I can't identify, but I know people are feeling that for sure. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end this and show you. It looks like there's a high level of loyalty. 34% of you said you're loyal to a 10.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and then some varying numbers there.
Yeah.
So sorry about that,
I
Rich.
suppose if it's weak, then you're really not a fan. I don't know.
So we're
And
gonna.
what would be interesting is the stories behind it too, because I've heard people tell stories of how they waited in line, for 6 hours to get Michael Jackson tickets in the rain, or they camped out, and just really irrational things that people do, especially spending habits as well.
So if you have any of those stories, feel free to put those in the chat. I'm excited to hear about these 4 opportunities that you have, Rich, to make or break that emotional connection.
Yeah, let me get back to that. I'm sorry I forgot the poll here. The 4 opportunities, and I think they're in order of importance as I see it. The most important one is attitude. If you come across as indifferent to a customer, you're working on a 3 or 4 at best. But if you come across as really enthusiastic and sincere, this is how people, in fact, to me, it's the number one reason why people give you a 5. It's just an attitude which they can pick up in a nanosecond. Then how you communicate to a customer is really important. Are you self-centered, or do you really focus on them by kind of getting to know them, making it a relationship? The third issue is performance. And we like to contrast what we call unremarkable performance, which is doing your job. But that's it. Outstanding performance is when you do something different, something that stands out, something that's memorable. And people who give just a little bit more really do better in terms of their customer satisfaction, in terms of creating that experience. And then the last issue is how you handle a service failure. You don't have to lose customers because something goes wrong, as long as you own it rather than being defensive. So these are the 4 areas, and I want to talk about the most important one. We'll kind of concentrate most of our time, and that has to do with attitude. And the kind of attitude that loses customers is what I call disinterest, because I want to incorporate into that not just people who are or indifference. Ask for a poll right now. When you're a customer, if you had to rank the customer experience that you have in terms of positive, kind of average, or these people who are serving you come across as disinterested, where do you think the majority falls in terms of your, all the times that you interact with a place of business as a consumer?
And people are already answering, so thank you. Lori says she's happy to report that she's never waited out in the rain for a TV concert or store opening. So we'll give you a couple more minutes. Here's an interesting comment. Not sure if I should read it or not, but I will. I'll be brave. Joanne says she feels like our elected officials need to be aware of those 4 elements of serving customers well.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. It looks like about half of you have voted. I'll give you a couple of more seconds. Now, we're aware that sometimes people can't see the poll. So in the event that you can't see the poll, but you want your voice to be heard, you could feel free to put your comments in the chat. So what I'm seeing here is about 60% of you say that the attitude of the people who serve you when you're the customer is average. And only 23% of you think that people who serve you have a positive attitude.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's probably, I would say, my own experience as well. Although I might put the disinterested a little higher and the positive a little lower, because I tend to think that, you know, when you have someone who really gives customer service with a positive attitude, I think it stands out. I think it's distinctive, you know, because I feel like, you know, you go to the store, you go, you know, through the checkout line, you go get a bite to eat, you know, and most of the people that serve you, they're just doing their job, and they're nominally friendly. Did you find everything you needed? And I'm surprised how frequently I feel like I get treated in a way that's rude or very impersonal. I'm just shocked sometimes that anybody could do that, but it happens. I think we all have stories we could tell in terms of bad customer service. But what I thought would be interesting to do is talk about what does a disinterested attitude look like? You know, when you walk in a place of business, what kind of things tip you off that this person who's supposed to be serving you isn't really into it? You know, maybe we can kind of get some responses in terms of what cues you look for that kind of make you feel that this particular person, they're not really focused on, you know, the greatest attitude.
So here's what I see so far: chatting with other coworkers, not smiling, on their phone, bad eye contact, trying to serve more than one person at a time, talking to other employees instead of attentive to you, no comment of like, hello, or how can I help you, slow to greet you, focus on themselves, the tone of their voice, ignoring you. Yeah, lots of looking at your smartphone. Yeah, thanks for all the comments. Wow, there's lots.
This is what I'm talking about. I feel like if I really think about it, I go into a place of business. You know, how frequently do you get eye contact and a sense of, you know, really kind of a personal exchange where you can just see that they love their job and they love serving you? More often than not, I feel like I experience some of the things that these other people were saying. And you know, I think that lowers somebody's score. You know, you're not going to give a 5 if you have that kind of experience.
So, Rich, if we all know that attitude is so important, why do you think so many workers come across this way as impersonal or indifferent or distracted? And is that something that we can change?
You know, that's the $1 million question. And that's frankly why clients have us come in to help them with this. Because first of all, I think it has to do with what people think is giving them a bad attitude. Now, if you think your bad attitude is caused by your job, which a lot of people do, I hate this job, you know, I'm unappreciated, I don't get paid enough. Or if you think that the reason you have a bad attitude is your boss or your coworkers, which it ranks really high in terms of how people feel about where their negative attitude is coming from, then I think you're never going to get over the bad attitude. However, if people recognize that their bad attitude is what they choose to focus on, then we have some hope. Now, you may remember this, Becky. This is what we call the victimeter. 20% of the population at large tend to have a victim mentality, which means they have an external locus of control. They think what's controlling their emotions and their mood is something outside of themselves. It's my boss, it's my job, it's the pay. And 60% live in the middle. You ask them, how's your job? It pays the bills. I'm hanging in there, getting by or whatever. 20% have an internal locus of control. They realize it's up to them, that how they talk to themselves, what they choose to focus on, and this conversation that goes on in their head is the most important part of being able to maintain a good attitude. So you don't tell yourself, why do I always get the difficult customers? You tell yourself, we all have our share of challenging customers, and looking at it as an opportunity to kind of win them over. It's when people take ownership of their attitude, this is how things can change. And quite frankly, when people do this, they come across differently in how they interact with a customer. And I gotta say, this wasn't set up, but a plug for Weaving Influence. You and your team, this is how we feel when we interact with you. You love what you do, you love the people you interact with, and that passion comes across, and it forms that emotional attachment right away. And I think that what I'd be interested in knowing is for those on the call, what do you feel conveys a positive attitude when you're a customer? What kinds of things are cues to you that the person that's serving you really does have a certain passion and sincerity about what they do? This is the flip side of the question we looked at before.
Yes, and we invite you to put that in the chat. So what I see so far is eye contact, using your name, going above and beyond, smiling, always responsive, solving my problem, using positive words and phrases. Wow, this is so fast. I can't read that fast. Let's see. Using positive words and phrases, even if they can't or won't do what I'm asking. Genuine caring, active listening, optimistic, smile, attention to detail, a sincere joy to see them come in, making a special exception, acknowledgement, being personable. Lots of comments there.
Great. Yeah, and I think, it's so recognizable when someone has a positive attitude. I find, because I travel and I'm on the road a lot, at least I used to before the isolation, there's all these interactions that I have with different people. And every once in a while, there's just a sparkle in someone's eye, and they just take a moment to really give you that eye contact and personalize the experience. And boy, that just changes everything. One of the things that I wanted to mention, because the concentration of the program today is going to be on attitude and communication. But when we talk about service failures, which we'll just kind of do briefly today, there's the benefit when you have a good attitude of creating what's called the halo effect. In other words, if I like you, if I feel that emotional connection because of the way you treat me, then I overlook the fact that you're 5 minutes late, or I have to wait in line, or there's a glitch here, or this isn't what I wanted. There's latitude that we give places of business when we have that emotional connection because of their attitude. And the converse is true also. There's something that's called the horns effect, which we don't hear about as much as the halo effect, but as you might guess, it's just the opposite, where we demonize a place of business because we don't like the way they treat us, and now they can't do anything right, and we're looking for the mistakes. And so being able to start the relationship with a customer off on the right foot by attitude really goes a long way. And I think it's probably more important than people realize.
Yeah, that's helpful. So, this positive attitude is a really big deal. What other recommendations do you have, Rich, about other ways to connect emotionally with customers?
Well, I think the second one kind of falls on the heels of attitude. It's how we communicate, how we interact with the customer. And I'm going to contrast self-centered and other-centered. Now, what I mean by self-centered is not necessarily egotistical. Although that's a real turnoff, if you're a customer and the person serving you is talking about themselves all the time. It can also be where they don't engage a customer. They ignore the customer. This is when you're on your phone, when you're talking to a coworker, or when you've got your head down when someone comes to the counter and you're working on something else. That sense of being ignored is starting to affect the customer experience, and you're going to go down in points right away. Now, the other side, the one side is you don't engage the customer, but the other side is what I would call over-engagement, when it's a one-sided communication. This can happen real easily when you're smart in your particular area of business and you know what you're doing. You're the expert, but it comes across that way, because you're doing all the talking and you're not engaging in a conversation. It's not a dialogue anymore, it's a monologue. They actually have a term for this. It's called a conversational narcissist. If you look at the conversation back and forth, if you're doing 80% of the talking or more, you're a conversational narcissist. In fact, they say the best way to make sure that you avoid that, to be the kind of person that people want to engage with, is to try and do 20-80, where you're doing 20% of the talking and 80% of the listening. I think that can be a good safeguard to make sure that it's at least 50-50. But I think we all know people who, they're good at what they do, they're smart in their profession, but they dominate the conversation. And this is a real turnoff for customers. In fact, I have a question, a poll question that I wanted to ask. It's somewhat comedic, but if you wouldn't mind throwing it up there, I think
I'm
everyone
ready.
knows conversational narcissist.
So what annoys you the most? Untangling your earbuds. I guess you don't have AirPods then. Updating your computer, scrubbing a greasy pan, going to the dentist, or having lunch with a conversational narcissist. I don't know, some of us these days, we just like to get out for lunch, Rich. So we'll give you a few moments on that.
Feeling like you're sitting across the table from someone who just, they don't take a breath, they interrupt, your conversation, steer it to themselves. I'm curious if it's as annoying to others as it is to me.
So I'll give you a couple more seconds, and apologies to those who can't see the poll. One of these days I have to figure out why that is, that some of you can see it and some of you cannot. Vacationing with a narcissist. So Erica says that she thinks untangling her earbuds is more annoying with capital letters because she can get through lunch by cutting it short. So I'm going to end the poll and show you the results. And here we go.
So it looks like the majority of you feel the way I do. And I think what's interesting is most people are unaware when they're conversational narcissists. So to me, the only cue, the only thing that can really help us is to really intentionally be other-centered, to try and think about that 20-80, like, you're doing most of the listening instead of the talking. And this is, to me, no matter how much you know, no matter how much you're the subject matter expert, it's very important for you to make the customer feel like they're a part of the conversation, because it's relationship that matters here. People like to do business because of who they trust, and that's about relationship. It's not about knowledge or expertise. It is this emotional experience. And one of the things that I'll do, and I would like you to be thinking about this because you're going to have a poll question in a minute, is I ask people, think about who you like being around and why. Like, whose company do you enjoy? Because according to studies or research, and I want to see if this aligns with what people are thinking, here are the things that help us to feel like we're important to the person we're conversing with. One is, these people know how to make a connection. They look for common interests. They first acknowledge you when you come in. They initiate the conversation. They don't wait for you to ask them for help or whatever, they seek you out, and they start the conversation. And part of connecting with people is the forgotten art of small talk. I tell people, if you're an introvert, the part of small talk you need to remember is talk. But if you're an extrovert, the part you need to remember is small. So you don't want to hog the conversation. It's just talking about things that are relevant, talking about current events, and asking them about themselves, getting to know them, and then looking for common interests, because we tend to share something in common with almost everybody if we know how to ask the right questions. And that's part of the support. Showing support, I think that the most important step here is inquiry, learning the art of asking questions. When I meet people, and I think my wife would tell you this is true, I tend to take the role of a talk show host. I pretend I'm Oprah. So tell me, what have you been working on lately? So where did you grow up? What was that like? And I just ask lots of exploratory questions, because people like to talk about themselves. They want to feel like you're interested in them. And then you really listen, and you show empathy. If it's a customer situation, they're having a problem, you try to identify with that, and then you offer assistance or ways to help. I love when I go into Whole Foods, because they're trained when you say, can you tell me where the honey is? They don't say it's in aisle 10 by the deli. They walk you there. They actually walk you there, and maybe they'll tell you a little bit about the product, but that kind of assistance really makes that emotional connection. Appreciation is very important. We like to be around people who make us feel good about ourselves. So trying to be understanding and show respect to people and express gratitude in ways that you can, even giving people compliments. We like to be around people who elevate us. They have a positive energy. I always ask people, how many of you know somebody who walks in the room and they just have a positive energy? It's like the sun just came in. And how many of you know people who walk in the room and it's like a cloud just rolled in and it's a downer, and they drain you with their energy? We want to be around uplifting people. We love to be around people with a sense of humor. When we laugh, it releases endorphins. So that's an important part of connecting with others and being other-centered. And finally, enlightenment. I know I'm the kind of person that loves information and trivia, but if we feel like we can learn something from other people, they're interesting and they are up on current events, these are the things that usually cause us to like to be around other people and interaction. So now the poll question. Let's see, when you think of that person that you like to be around, I'll let you ask the question, Becky, since this is your job.
Sure, no problem. So which of these 5 traits do they demonstrate that I think maybe that's most important to you? And I'm not clear if we can give one or more response. Kelly, can you tell me, are people able to give more than one response? I can't take it as the host. Yes, you can give more than one response. So which of these 5 traits does someone that you enjoy conversing with demonstrate? And there's been some interesting chatter in the chat, Rich, and one question that maybe we can ask while people are answering the poll. Cynthia wants to know why you think active listening is so hard for most of us.
Wow, that's a really good question. And I actually feel like when I do training, I always tell people that I feel like, I've been in this soft skill business for about 30 years. To me, there are 2 things that are the biggest struggle. One is denial. We always think we do better than we actually do. But the other, I feel, is most people are poor listeners. And when I've thought about why that is, some of it, I think, is it hasn't been modeled to us. When we grow up, our parents don't always ask for our input, and sometimes that could be part of it. And I think sometimes it's insecurity, where we feel like we have to kind of be talking and saying something to fill the spaces. And so we may not feel as comfortable just listening. We don't feel we know the right questions to ask. And so I encourage people to look into this, find out, there are books out there on how to be a good listener. There are good books on the art of inquiry. I think you can learn and develop these skills.
So let's take a look at these results. It looks like the 2 most important are connection and appreciation, according to our
great.
attendees today. So how do these results compare to what you would have expected, Rich?
Well, Yeah, I think these are really significant. Usually elevation, wanting to be around someone who's positive with a good sense of humor, usually that leads the list when I kind of get people in a classroom. But I think appreciation is usually very high as well. And people who connect with us, we want people who make us feel significant. And so if I talk about what you're interested in, and especially if I have something in common with that interest, that really creates that connection very rapidly. Most of our best friends are people who, we have something in common, and so that sense of connection really is significant. And I think we can find it if we're willing to do a little bit of work. There are people that you might ostensibly think, oh, we don't have anything in common. But if you kind of are willing to do this art of inquiry, you find out, oh, there it is. We have this thing in common. And that's what you really want to try and focus on in your conversation. But I always tell people that, when you go back to that first exercise, what are you a fan of? If you can find out what somebody's a fan of and talk about that, you will create that emotional connection. So if someone's a Pittsburgh Steelers fan and you start talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you don't even have to know a lot about it, just ask questions like you're interested, that part of their brain will light up. So if I talked about running marathons with you, Becky, because I know that's something that you do, even though I would never run a marathon myself, just asking you questions about that experience, you would love to talk to me all day. For me, it's drumming. I love to drum. And so, if someone shows an interest in that part of my brain will light up. So that's the greatest way to make a connection. But being other-centered, I think, is almost as important as attitude. These two are really the entree into making that emotional connection and getting fives with your customers.
Can I just say that we have a lot of Steelers fans in the house, and also, I'm sorry, my dog is barking, and I'm trying to figure out if my kids can get her to stop. But as I am on a stay-at-home order, there's no avoiding the barking dog.
We're on the same boat there. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, and Steelers fans and Chiefs fans, all of those fans. So I know we want to leave time for questions, but can we talk about at least 2 other opportunities to emotionally connect with customers before we go to some questions and comments from our attendees today?
Yes, and I'll try to do this with some rapidity so we leave time for questions. But the 2 other opportunities to emotionally connect. Third is performance. And unremarkable performance is not to say anything about people who like vanilla ice cream, but if you went into an ice cream shop and vanilla was the only flavor they had, that would be a pretty boring experience. And I remember when 33 flavors came to town when I was a young kid, and that was just like eye-popping because you had so many choices. The bland vanilla kind of experience as customers is forgettable. If I asked most people who went shopping last week or went out to eat, although I know we're not doing that right now so much, but you wouldn't be able to remember who served you. If you put them in a lineup, you probably couldn't pick them out. So to me, the distinguishing factor of what I call outstanding performance is it's memorable. If you remember it, then that person did their job because they did something that's unique, unexpected, extraordinary. I always remember the story of a book I read one time where a guy, he said that he usually stays at, I don't remember, maybe it was the Hilton. And whenever he was on business in Knoxville, Tennessee. And this particular time, they were booked. He forgot to make a reservation. He was forced to stay at the Residence Inn. He wasn't too happy about that. When he got up in the morning, he said it was cold. There was snow and ice on the windshield, and he had to rent a car, no scraper. But he looked and noticed that his entire car was scraped off, and there was a note on the windshield. And when he picked it up, it said, "Windshields are on us. Have a great day, Residence Inn." And then he looked down and noticed all the cars had been cleaned off and had a note on it. He said, "Now do you know where I go when I stay in Knoxville? The Residence Inn." So whenever we do something extra, something that's a little unexpected and above and beyond, that really secures that emotional connection and causes people to be loyal to your brand. And then the last issue, and I do wish we had more time to talk about this because a lot of people don't know how to get out of this defensive mode. But when something goes wrong, there's a service failure. If you're naturally defensive, which most people are, you're going to be hurting your score in terms of that emotional customer experience. And a lot of people, I think it has to do with a lack of emotional intelligence. So those of you who are listening, if you want some help because you realize you can be a little defensive, read some books on emotional intelligence. I would recommend Emotional Intelligence 2.0 because it's a good summary of, I think, the core elements. But if we lock down, and how many of us have had an experience where something went wrong as a customer and we try to talk to the manager and they're defensive about it. And how many times do we vow, I will never go back to this place of business ever again? So the solution is to learn to take ownership. So when something goes wrong, you go out of your way, you bend over backwards to do whatever you can to rectify a service failure. And then you end up having a customer for life, even though something went wrong. And I'll give you one example, and then maybe we can open it up for questions. I remember one time years ago, my wife and I went into a restaurant. I won't name the restaurant, but they have rocking chairs out front. And I'm just teasing there. This is a good story. So you probably know already it's Cracker Barrel. But what happened was that the server, she was really swamped. And you could tell that in her face. She had a very disinterested attitude because her mind was elsewhere. And that I'm a pretty patient person, so that didn't bother me. But when I ordered my food, she forgot 2 of the items that I ordered when she brought everybody's food. So I just politely said, when you get a chance, you forgot my toast and my orange juice. And she looked up at me and said, do you want me to sit down and eat it for you too? And I was just mortified because, and I could tell she was stressed out. And I'm never one to really complain, but I just patiently got up, walked over and find the manager and told him what happened. And he said, we are so sorry. This is not the way we want to do business. All 4 breakfasts are on us today. And I want to give you and your wife a coupon for dinner. I hope you'll come back and try us again. So when that kind of action takes place in the face of a service failure, what can you say? It's like, wow, that I'm a customer for life. And so when something goes wrong, the important thing is to listen to the complaint non-defensively. And people, by the way, want to process their emotions. Don't shut them down. Don't try to fix the problem too early. Make sure you communicate that you empathize with how they're feeling, and then do what you can to rectify the problem. So these 4 ways, attitude, communication, performance, and service failures are the 4 opportunities to emotionally connect. And I really feel, I want to say this as I conclude and open it up for questions. At this time, with the economy in crisis, it's never more important than now to have loyal customers. And people are going to do business with people they trust right now, especially if they have to scale back. And relationships are at the heart of this. And we just have to go beyond thinking customer satisfaction is enough. We really need to strive for customer loyalty, and that's all about emotionally satisfied customers.
So I have a request, Rich, that you could put the attitude slide back up.
Okay.
And we definitely want to invite folks to share comments and questions in the chat. The chat has been so busy today, and I love seeing the interaction. That's my favorite part of these calls. So here's the attitude slide, Sue. I hope that helps.
This is the negative, and this is the positive. I'm not sure which slide they were referring to because there were a series of slides. So
yeah, I'm not sure. I think our intention is to send a PDF of the slides with our follow-up materials, which will go out either later today or first thing tomorrow. So if you're looking for some specific slides, we are happy to share them. So here's a comment from Carol that essential service businesses have a real chance to shine in the current environment. Yes, and I agree with you. And likely they're under more pressure than ever. So potentially as
Yeah.
customers, we have a chance to offer empathy and compassion. So Glenn has a question. He's wondering how customer service should change during this current crisis. And then I have another great question from Judith, and we'll get to that one next.
Yeah,
So,
I really feel that what's changing right now is the need for many of us to do virtual business, to learn how to connect virtually. And I think it's a great opportunity to take advantage of, Facebook and LinkedIn and more importantly, Zoom and Skype and other ways to kind of, because they've done studies that oxytocin is produced when we bond with people. And believe it or not, we can get that through social media. Even when you hit like or someone likes something that you post, it produces oxytocin. So I think staying in touch virtually is important. And I think the other thing is trying to really serve right now. So I have a lot of clients who, they don't have a lot of money, but if we're like, hey, you know what, we just want to be there for you. Here, we'll give you a free seat in this virtual training that we're offering. You're building loyalty for the future because this isn't going to last forever. We may have to adjust to a new normal, but I do think that, there'll be another end to this.
sure. So Judith's question is, do you have any extra suggestions for those of us who are working from home and dealing with customers? And so I'll let you answer. I might have a point of view on that.
Yeah, go right ahead. I'm curious to hear your point of view, Becky.
Oh, okay. Well, so Judith, it just occurs to me that one of the ways is to, if there are any breakdowns, to get on the phone or on a Zoom call right away to communicate with your customers. I was sharing with Rich before this call that I've proactively reached out to many of our customers to schedule meetings to check in to see how they're doing during the crisis. And I had the first one of those meetings this morning, and the client was just really happy to have the chance to connect, really grateful that I checked in on them. So I'm not sure what type of customers you serve, Judith, but proactively reaching out and touching base with customers can be really helpful during this time, particularly if you can have face-to-face meetings. I try when, I would say 90% of my meetings are face-to-face on Zoom. I very rarely speak to someone only on the phone, and it creates a much more interactive. It does make a difference.
That makes a difference. It's one of the reasons why we feel attached to Weaving Influence is because we see your face. And I would add one more thing to Judith's question, and that is that when you interact with your customers, like I had a conversation with a major client this morning, big insurance company. First thing I said, hey, before we do anything else, how are you doing personally with handling what's going on? And I could tell they really appreciated that. So before we just kind of talked about business, recognize that everyone's coping with this anxiety and fear, and kind of taking that personal touch before you kind of get down to business, I think is more important now than ever.
Yeah, that's a really important point, Rich. So here's a question. I think you might say your name, Emily. I hope I'm getting it right. She's wondering if there are any best practices that can be shared if the person that buys a service from a company isn't the day-to-day user. So how do you get the buyer to be loyal if you aren't interacting with them regularly?
I'm trying to make sure I understand that question. So what
you're
saying is there's an intermediary of some kind that...
Yeah, potentially. I mean, this could even apply, I guess, Rich, with the types of customers that you serve. So if a training and development person brings you in to do training and you're training a group of people there out in the fields, how do you create loyalty with the person who originally hired you? I don't know if that's a helpful example.
Yeah, well, I think it's all about trying to, I feel like every step of the way, it's treating everyone as if they're really important, like they're the most important person. So I know when I go into a place of business, I'm constantly in touch with maybe the VP of diversity that brought us in, or the training development director. But then I treat everyone that I interact with the same way, whether it's a participant in the class, trying to get to know them, finding out what makes them tick. And once I always look for like one or two things that I know this is really what makes this person tick. And that's what I try to focus on in a conversation with them. I don't know if that helps because I'm not sure I really understand the question exactly, but I just think, personalize every contact however you can.
Well, I would think that it would eventually get back to the person who bought the service. So if the end user is
Yes,
happy,
yes,
then the person who bought the service is going to be happy.
that's right.
And that's a really important point, to treat everyone as if they're important along the way. So Rob has an interesting question slash comment or point of view. He says, what would happen if service companies gave a great service allowance to each employee to use to create these types of experiences? Could it be
Wow.
transformational for employees and
Yes.
customers?
I've heard stories about Disney that they're given a certain amount of money in the gift shops. Like if a child comes in crying, they can give them a stuffed animal, and I really think that that's a good point. If there was an allowance, latitude for the individual employees who are on the front lines with the customers to use their discretion to wow a customer in certain situations, yeah, it would be off the charts in terms of customer loyalty. Unfortunately, there's so many companies that the way they do their math, they think, well, if we would lose X amount of money if we did that, but they don't think about the return. The studies that I looked at suggest that a loyal customer increases your revenues 23% in comparison to your rationally satisfied customer. They'll spend more, they'll tell more people, and they do business with you for a longer amount of time. So I just think it's worth doing anything you can. At RDR Group, our good customers, there are times when we give dramatic discounts and just do whatever we need to do because we know it's going to be a long-term relationship.
Yes, I love that. So Rob is following up to say that he thinks that Marriott has an allowance to any employee to fix problems. And, the
That's
comment
great.
is, why not use it to create great experiences? So
Yes,
to do better before there's a problem.
right.
So we have a question about leading teams remotely, considering the pandemic situation to keep customers and employees enthusiastic. So, what
Um,
can a leader do to support team members who are working remotely in serving customers well?
I don't know whether this will have universal application, but this device right here, I think can be a wonderful way to communicate to your virtual team. If I got a text this morning from somebody I work with and said, "Boy, we couldn't get through this time without you," and what we really like about you, Rich, is how you always have a positive attitude. You're so easygoing, and personalize it and make it, those kinds of things that it gives a burst of both oxytocin and serotonin and creates that bond with people. So use technology. My wife will tell you when I'm on the road, I'm texting her all the time, and we'll send little gifs and memes back and forth. But those kinds of things are a way to, you can virtually bond, and I would use technology as much as possible to be able to make that happen.
So thanks to Kristen, who says an example of what we've been talking about is these daily connections and webinars, and we're
Yes.
thrilled to bring them to you. So for those of you who are interested in finding out more about what Rich and the team at RDR Group do, do you have another slide that has stuff about how
Oh,
people
you
can
know
stay
what?
in touch with you?
I didn't put it in. I'm sorry.
No worries. So some ways that you can stay in touch with Rich. You can visit Rich's website at rdrgroup.com, and Kelly, our chat host today, has put that in the chat for you. You can also email Rich, and Kelly, if you can grab Rich's email address and put that in the chat. And you could also go to LinkedIn and connect with Rich on LinkedIn, and I'd also be thrilled to connect with you on LinkedIn. Sometimes I get requests and I'm not sure how people know me, so if you can just give me a quick note, hey, I've been on your webinars, I'll be sure to accept your request right away. I'm sure Rich would do the same. We want to be connected to you, and we hope today's session provided value to you. We will be back with more sessions of the Daily Connection. At the current time, we are scheduled through April 16th, but I have a few more people who really want to be able to participate, so we might be extending longer. So if you're a fan of us extending past April 16th, go ahead and let me know that in the chat. or you can send me an email. I'm Becky@weavinginfluence.com, and we will get these slides to you with our follow-up materials and the recording to you, and we look forward to connecting with you in the future. Rich, any parting words or key takeaways that you want people to have as we end today?
I just wanted to say this with utter sincerity, that if you want an example of exceptional service, you don't need to look any further than Becky and Weaving Influence, because really all these things that we've mentioned, you have it happening, and it really makes a difference for us. So in these times, it feels like a friendship more than just a partnership, and I think that's what we're all striving for. So it's comforting in these times.
Thank you, Rich. Take care, everyone.